Hello and welcome to Fair Isle. She is the cruising boat that we chose when we were looking to live aboard. It took us about a year to find her and we've been living on board for nearly 3 years now. This video will take you through some of the decisions that we made when buying her and also some of the things we've learnt over the past 3 years. It will also look at some of the things you may want to consider if you're also wanting a cruising boat for more than just weekend sailing.
So firstly, general layout. Do you really need all those cabins? We'll go through hull shapes and which ones to avoid. What's the best rig? Oh, I've given that one away. And electrics. As a liveaboard, you're going to need lots of power. Fortunately, these days, there's good options.
So some of it is a question of taste. What's the galley like? Can I cook there? Can I sit in the saloon? Where are we going to sleep? Do we need a stateroom? That kind of thing.
Yeah, you've got to keep in mind that you're looking for a boat to live on, and a boat for weekend sailing doesn't necessarily make a good cruising boat for long-term living. So really think about how you're going to use the space, where all your things are going to go, and that you can actually live on it comfortably. So when we came to look at the layout for Fair Isle, we weren't just looking for the aesthetics of it, it was also the safety, how it's going to be as a blue water boat. Fair Isle's quite a big boat, and having a centre cockpit works well. Anything I think over about 45 foot, having a centre cockpit makes things much easier short-handed, much easier when you come into port to be able to see around the boat, to be able to handle lines, that sort of thing. Obviously you have a better motion in the centre of the boat as well, so it's a nicer, easier motion to be in the centre of the boat than the back of the boat. You're just not going to get pushed around so much, so that was a consideration for us.
It was. The other thing that actually we both liked, but we didn't realise how much we'd like it, is this solid doghouse. I mean, that's been invaluable. Not only does it shelter you from the sun, which we haven't had that much of, but we know it's going to be useful there, but the bad weather that we've had, crossing the Biscay, that kind of thing. It means you can just get out of the wind, which you can't necessarily when you're obviously standing up helming, but it gives you a break. It really, and that has been just invaluable.
I mean, I've done a lot of sailing on boats with different sorts of Biminis and Dodgers and whatever, and I've never had one with a solid doghouse like this. And I expected that, it's going to be good, but I didn't expect it to be just the brilliant feature that it is. And one of the key things, if you sit in the chair there, Jude, so it's the key thing is that it comes back far enough to here, that it overlaps so that you're completely out of the wind. Most Dodgers, they come to here. You're still getting buffeted, you've still got that wind, and that's just wearing. I mean, even in good, we're not sailing in bad conditions, sailing in sunshine and warmth, it's still so much nicer to be able to come out and sit in somewhere like this, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely.
So one of the things to consider with a centre cockpit is you don't have a lot of outside storage normally with a centre cockpit, and you do need some storage outside. We've got quite a big sail locker. In here there are 2 small lockers. You need one of those empty because there's always bits of garbage, bits of rubbish that you overflow that you can't get rid of until you go into port, and you need somewhere outside to put that. So we've got that. But we've also got these, and they're really important. There's 2 big boxes here and a couple more on the deck to put all outside bits and pieces. So have that as a consideration when you're looking at a boat all the time. Where are you going to store things? Think of all the things that you're going to need, and you're going to have somewhere to put them. So obviously when you come below, storage massively important down here. Look at where your tanks are in any boat. This boat's very good because it's got all the tankerage down in the keel. It's an encapsulated keel. We've got 2 water tanks, 3 fuel tanks, 2 black water tanks. All those are away. So it means all the area underneath the saloon cupboards here is free for storage, and you're going to need a lot of storage. Think of all the food, all the spares, clothes, everything else that you're going to need, even if it's just a couple on a boat. And this is quite a big boat. We fill up everything within this boat. The other thing to notice about boats, and I went on a boat once at a boat show. It was a new production boat, a Hansa. It's about the same size as this. As I came down the steps of the companionway, you look at the boat, it looked 3 times the size of this. It looked enormous. If a salesman tells you this is the biggest inside area for a 40-foot boat, then run a mile, because what they've done is make it look big by not putting the storage in, not having cupboards, not having all that, just to make it look big. The other thing that a lot of production boats are missing are handholds. So whatever boat you go on, think of what it's going to be like in a seaway. These are all places that you can hold on to as you go through. A lot of modern boats, I think they expect you to fly from the companionway steps into the saloon. That's probably what you would do in reality, if even a big seaway. So look at what it's going to be like actually at sea.
Sailing offshore means you need to eat offshore. If this is your galley, then the crew is likely to go hungry. To be able to work on it at sea, it has to be long and thin, or a horseshoe shape, and of course you need space.
The thing about a galley is you've got to have enough space to work. That means surface space. It's not going to be as much as you have at home, but it's got to be enough. You also need to be able to hold on when you're down here. So holding on here when things get a little bit rocky upstairs. And finally, a freezer. Do you or don't you want a freezer? Well, it really depends on how much time you're going to be spent going from shore to shore, how much time you're going to be out at sea, because it does take a lot of power. So that's a calculation you're going to have to work out.
This is a design feature that seems to be all the rage now as well. Armchairs in the saloon. I would just say beware if it means there's nowhere to sleep in the saloon on passage. We have a dedicated pilot berth, but we don't use it shorthanded, as I don't want to be locked away in a cabin while Judy's on watch. If that's your situation, then a berth with a lee cloth in the saloon is best. Your normal non-sailing berth is just down to personal choice. Playing footsie in a V-berth isn't for everyone.
One thing that was really important to me when we were looking at boats is I wanted to have a centerline double bed with a space each side for books so you can sit up and read. Now, it is important for me that you can read, but a Pullman berth frankly would have been fine, so don't get too hung up on that. But one thing that is important then and now, 3 years later, is this: having a separate shower in the head, one where you have got a seat that you can sit on, because when things got rocky over the Bay of Biscay, that was essential.
Unless you're going for a catamaran, you're unlikely to have a lot of space on deck. Judy and our girls, when they visit, just want enough space to sunbathe. There will be things to store on deck though. If you can find a spot for the dinghy, that's good. Towing a dinghy is not a good idea, but we all do it sometimes. Davits can be great on the right boat, but having a dinghy crashing around over the transom isn't always a good idea.
Now, before we move on, I just want to talk a little bit about size. If we imagine that this is your boat and you decide you want one twice the size. People think of boats in terms of length, and apart from marina fees, which do go on length, it's going to cost you a lot more to have twice the size of boat. But that isn't twice the size of boat unless you're moving on to a narrow boat. By having a boat twice the length, you're going to end up with a boat pretty much twice the beam and twice the draft stroke topsides. So it's going to end up looking like that. Now, what does that mean? Well, it means that the wetted area, if you look at the surface here, instead of having one area there, you've got 4 times as much. So that's 4 times as much anti-foul, 4 times as long it's going to take to do that sort of work. So that's a bit of a bummer. Now, if you look at volume here, we haven't got 1 matchbox, we've got 8 matchboxes. So you've got 8 times the load carrying capacity. You might be somewhere near 8 times the displacement as well with a boat like this. Now, that is good actually as a cruising boat, because you don't want to have all your stuff overloading your boat. I would say that probably, well, most of the under 40-foot boats under there that are liveaboard cruising boats are overloaded, some dangerously so. So with a bigger boat, the percentage of weight of your stuff is less than the actual weight of the boat. So that makes things a lot easier, a lot safer living aboard. The final thing we want to talk about though is stability. Now, this is a little bit more complicated on the maths scale here.
I'll leave some of the formulas on the website, but just remember that size plays a big part in stability. So moving up to a boat twice the length is liable to give you about 16 times the stability.
Form stability will play a big part in how stable your boat is as well. That's just the shape of the hull. A wide beamy hull is just inherently more stable than a thin V-shaped one. We won't cover that too much in this. We're going to try and put all these sort of details, the more technical details, onto the website, so do have a look at that to go through it. But before we move on to other things to do with hull design, the ultimate really in form stability is obviously a catamaran. Now I'm no expert on catamarans, I'm not going to do a lot on catamarans, but there's one thing we should talk about with catamarans, because it's a common misconception, is that people think that a catamaran being a huge area, you can load it full of stuff. You know, it's great as a liverboard, people will say, because you can just carry so much stuff on it. Well, nothing could be further from the truth there, because the thing about a catamaran is, although you've got the space, you really don't want to be loading it up to make it heavy. In a gust of wind, they're designed to accelerate to use that power. If they're heavy and overloaded and digging in as well, they can't do that. So all that strain is going straight onto the rig, and that's what makes it dangerous.
So beamy, flat-bottom boats have good form stability. Does that make them good cruising boats? In a word, no. And there's many reasons for that. This modern design has virtually no bilge, so no storage below the sole, and all the tanks under the bunks, using up the storage there, and bringing the centre of gravity higher. One big wave down an open hatch and you'll be chasing your shoes as they float around the cabin. Compare that to this Hauberg Rassi. All the tanks are where they should be, under the sole, and there's still enough room down there for a pretty decent wine cellar. For a good cruising boat, you're definitely looking for a nicely contoured V-shape. The modern trend for fat-assed yachts to make room for their double wheels and twin aft cabins make for a fantastic marina boat or coastal cruising boat. If you want it for more than that, then choose your design carefully. Some have lost too much balance in their hull designs, while others have done all they can to at least retain a good underwater profile. The genesis of these sorts of designs has come from racing boats. But these are planing hulls, and all cruising boats are a displacement hull. Even if you've got some racy type design that's supposed to be semi-planing, by the time you've got all your liverboard stuff aboard, it won't be. And it's much worse than that. These boats aren't really meant to heel. Bad things happen when they heel because they're not well balanced. So a racing boat like this, an Open 60, has a canting keel and it has pumped water ballast to try and keep it upright. So if you have a boat with vastly different cross sections at the ends, you can see that as it heels, the buoyancy of the wide aft section would get much more of an uplift than the bow. This is going to make it difficult to steer and quite erratic.
So we will put the technical details of that on the website, so you can look at that, or just look up prismatic coefficient. That's the important figure that you're looking for, that's talking about the buoyancy fore and aft, trying to keep that the same. It's all to do with rocker. You might have heard of that before. Rocker is the ability for the boat basically to rock backwards and forwards. Bananas have good rocker and they would turn easily. A jar of olives has bad rocker. If you were trying to paddle one of these, you'd find it very difficult to turn it. So that's one of the reasons that the shape is there. But the more crucial reason, if we look at our Matchbox boat here, that's a little bit more boat shaped now, this one has got the fat-assed modern design here, which means that it's got a lot more buoyancy at the back end than the front end, basically. So it's not going to rock very well. It means that in a following sea, it gets lifted and buries the bow. Worse than that, it's got a big flat transom here that can really be pushed to really bury the bow. This particular boat is in real trouble because it's also got a plumb bow, which again is sort of stolen from the racers to make it look more racy. I mean, you know, it's all about waterline length. More waterline length will give you more inherent speed in a lot of cases. I'm not sure if that's true of this design particularly, but what it is doing here is two things. One, it's allowing the boat to bury much easier because it's not got that flare and the buoyancy to lift it back up as much as if it were cut away, and also it means that every time you anchor, you're going to take lumps out of your gel coat, so you better get good at gel coat repair. So in my opinion, it's not great as a cruising boat where you're anchoring all the time, and actually you want a boat that in heavy seas isn't going to get you into trouble and put a lot of white water over the top. So how do you get around that? Well, obviously in the old days, the easiest way and most straightforward way was to make a canoe-sterned boat. It's pointy both ends. It has lots of advantages. Fair Isle has exactly that. It is a great design as a seagoing boat. It's got the obvious disadvantage of the loss of space, though, in the back there. So you know you've compromised living space for maybe a better sailing shape. But it doesn't have to be like that way. It doesn't mean that you have to have a canoe stern boat to have a boat that's good in those conditions. And look at this. This is a Contessa 32, very old boat. It's a boat that I sailed as a teenager. Fantastic design. It's got a transom, but it's got beautifully curved underwater sections to its hull. Beautifully balanced, fantastic prismatic coefficient.
And the only boat in her class to finish the 79 Fastnet race. We should take note from that infamous race where 75 boats capsized, many of them because they lost their keels. This was down to bad design, and in the aftermath of the 79 Fastnet, designers reined back. But even in a well-designed keel, the boats are subject to fatigue and, if they're stainless steel, crevice corrosion, and they're in a very difficult place to inspect. So get to know your boat's weak points. We haven't talked about hull materials in this video, actually it needs a film in itself. But if, for instance, you choose a wooden boat, it pays to know the downsides.
When you see how easily that goes in.
Only you can say if the many upsides of having a wooden boat make it a good choice for you. And if you do need multiple cabins for cruising with the family, then a modern designed monohull or catamaran might be the wise choice. But go for a fast one and make your go-to heavy weather tactics outrunning storms rather than toughing them out. Fair Isle has a full keel, so the plus point that it can't fall off has to be weighed against the downside of being slower than a fin-keeled boat. Some people would also have manoeuvring at the dock as a downside, but I can honestly say it isn't something that would worry me. Have a look at the back and fill video for issues there.
Got a tiny bit of backwards way on and then blast her forwards.
Having a keel-hung rudder is definitely the biggest safety point on Fair Isle. Skeg-hung rudders offer some protection and may be a better option on smaller boats though, to retain as much speed as possible. Another option is a drop or swing keel. If I were just cruising the Bahamas, that's definitely what I'd go for. It's great to have a shoal draft in many situations, but a moving keel is something to go wrong, so make sure you get a tried and tested design. Also, a lot of these shallow bilged boats pound dreadfully going into wind, a trait you'd really do well to avoid. For me though, the major problem with these designs is they all tend to have this: twin rudders. Yes, I know I'm being a pussy and Halberg Rassi are going that way and Skip Novak has it on his new expedition boat, but it's just not for me. Remember, what's under the water is important, so get your hull design right and then sit in the transom and watch the lovely clean wake that a good hull design produces.
One of the things I was worried about when we bought Fair Isle, she's quite a big boat, was whether or not, with me being a relative novice, we'd actually be able to sail her.
Yeah, well, we were thinking of a smaller boat, weren't we?
Yeah,
and
yeah.
we're looking at smaller boats. It's only that we happened to look at a smaller Hans Christian and this one was there and couldn't resist it. And we did think, well, I thought, that two people on a boat this size, but it really hasn't been a problem, has it?
It's been much better than I thought it would be, particularly as we haven't got any electric winches, so everything has to be done by hand. I thought I'd get worn out, but in fact it's fine.
We're fairly lazy sailors, to be honest, aren't we? I mean, the Autohelm does most of the steering when we're out there. And one of the good things about a heavier boat, a less racy boat, is that it doesn't get overpowered too quickly. If you something like a Swan. I mean, in one of the episodes we interviewed the sailing gods, the Norwegians, a fantastic
Amazing
couple
people
in their 70s. But they're on a Swan, and you've really got to sail a Swan, because it's a racing hull, and you get to 15 knots of breeze, and you're going to be reefing, and 20 knots reefing again. We stick the sails up and that's it, done really most of the time for us. It's it's easy.
Yeah.
Autohelm does most of the steering. It's it's an easy boat to steer because it's long keeled. It goes like it's on rails. It's you got to decide what you want as a cruising boat and what you're happy with, and don't get something that maybe that's the difference you see between a weekend cruiser where you might be out there and everything's about the sailing. When you're cruising full time, you got to live as well.
And I'm quite happy to go slowly. I mean, like dead slowly. I don't mind 3-2 knots, so long as the winds, the sails aren't flapping. I'm happy.
Yeah, speed is an issue though. Don't disregard speed in a boat, because with modern weather forecasts being so good, being out in an open ocean, outrunning storms is distinctly possible if you've got a boat that's fast enough to do it. If you have, we're okay. This boat's big, so it's got speed because of that. If it were smaller and still long-keeled and too slow, then you might feel that, you can't outrun things, and that's a consideration to have.
And we did manage to outrun the storm in Biscay, which
we did.
was
Where
important for us.
Where smaller boats didn't, and because of that, spent 48 hours or more out being beaten up by a storm. So yeah, it's not to be sniffed at having a bit of speed, even though we don't mind going slowly, and this boat will sail nicely in light airs quite slowly, and that's fine.
And then you can go swimming, can't you, Steve?
We can. I do.
You do. I don't do that yet. I'm not sure I can still outswim the boat.
See, and we try not to we haven't been sort of too technical. We haven't got lots of gadgets on this boat, is it? I think it's something to resist, because it's more things to go wrong. So as nice it would be to have your electric winches. Electric winches, I mean, they're notorious for going wrong. Powerful electric things are a bit of a nuisance, I think. Electric windlass, electric bow thruster. We've got hydraulics, which I think is great, because it's they're more robust. If you can get it, I think that's if it's available on a boat you're looking for, that'd be a really good thing to have.
And things do go wrong. I mean, even with our Yankee, when we've got roller reefing there, and when it's jammed, it jammed.
Yes, well, you've got to be a serious sailor to be slab reefed on your foresails. I think you really will be up and down on foredeck all the time. So pretty much everyone has roller reefing, but yeah, they can go wrong. But the good thing about that is you can almost always get them out, and you can just drop the sail, which is what we did on that occasion.
Yeah.
We've stayed away from a roller reefing main. It wasn't available on any of the boats that we looked at, but I think I would be slightly hesitant on that, because that is something that it can quite easily go wrong when and get stuck out, and then you can't drop it. If it's slightly partially rolled and stuck, having a mainsail up and a big blow coming, that frightens me. But it would be lovely to have that, because that is one of the major issues all the time is the reefing that goes on with a main, isn't it?
But also not just the reefing, but getting it up, because that's the other thing. You tend to do that, don't you?
Yeah. Well, the system we have, and I like this system. A lot of people don't. They think that leading everything back to the cockpit is better. The problem I find with that is the friction involved with that, and the fact that you're pulling out, not pulling down, means that you can only get the sail halfway up, and then you're winching. And it takes a long time, and all that time you're into wind, and the sails are flapping away.
Yeah.
And it's all horrible. Whereas doing it from the mast and make sure that it comes out the mast high, so you can pull it all the way down with all your weight. I can get it within a metre or so at the top of the mast, and it's just a quick winch, and it's in, quickly done. And that's
I
the way
have tried that, and you're stronger than you look, because I get it like a third of the way up, and then I have to start winching. But still, I take your point. Clearly, if you can use your body weight to pull it, that's the best thing.
You find systems that work for what you are, what sort of crew you've got. Everything's a compromise, as we said, and it sort of does depend on what sort of sailors you are, and how many people you've got on board, obviously.
Yeah.
I've already given away my preference for cutter rigs on larger boats. Let's get into why. For a standard sloop, getting enough sail area to drive the boat sufficiently means having a large genoa, maybe 120% or so. This is fine for smaller boats, but get over about 40 foot and this large foresail becomes quite a handful to deal with short-handed. For a true cutter like Fair Isle, the mast is set further back. This makes the mainsail smaller and divides the foresails into two smaller sails, the Yankee, which is high cut, and the staysail. They can be used together when beating, and provide many options in different conditions. As the wind increases and you need to shorten sail, a sloop will look like this. The partially rowed genoa will lose shape and drive, and the drive it does give will have a centre of effort that's higher and further outboard, none of which is good. Shortening sail in a cutter can be done by rolling the Yankee in completely and just sailing on the staysail. This retains its shape and has a centre of effort low and close to the mast. On Fair Isle we also have a second removable forestay that can be tensioned with a Highfield lever. This means we can use a purpose-built storm jib. This is also a very good heavy weather setup for a standard sloop, perhaps with a trysail.
It is nice with a cutter rig to have all the sails up. I'm going to say gentlemen shouldn't sail to winds, but I think in this boat I quite like it.
Okay, you ketch lovers out there, I know that you have options too, and some that a cutter doesn't have, like using the mizzen as a riding sail. But on the whole, the extra standing rigging and having a second mast with that extra weight aloft means the cutter's the winner for me.
One of the things I was looking for when we went sailing was generating all our own power through sun, solar, or wind, and we looked into that quite a lot, didn't we? And we're not quite there yet.
Not with natural power in that way. No, we have a generator, an onboard generator. I'd like to do away with that at some point. We'll not have to rely on it 100%, because if the generator breaks, which it did on a shakedown cruise we did going around the Channel Islands.
And we had to eat the contents of our freezer,
We did,
which is
yes.
why I...
Because there was no way. We didn't have any solar at that point.
Yeah, we had to
so
switch
now
everything
we've got quite a bit of solar. We're putting more solar on. You can never have enough solar. I mean, we envy the catamarans that can have enough solar to just do everything in solar. And have the electric hobs and all that sort of stuff as well. We're never going to get that really on a sailboat. You can't get enough up. But we looked at wind as well, didn't we?
Yeah, and I think that's one of the debates we did have, was wind versus solar, or some people of course have both. With us having a wind generator would have cast a shadow probably on the solar, wouldn't it?
Well, the only thing with a sailboat like this, the only place you can put it is aft, because otherwise it's got to be up in the air and the sails are in the way. So you would inevitably in some points put a shadow on your solar panels. But really the clincher for us was we talked to quite a few people, didn't we, that had them. And these are the more modern ones. I mean, the old ones, when I was a teenager, that was all that was available. There was no solar, and they were terrible. They made a noise and they broke. Nowadays they're supposed to be much better, but people weren't happy with them. Vibrations, noise, breaking down.
Yeah. So I guess how much power you do use on a boat is a choice. We've mentioned the freezer. We use a lot of power in our computers, for our work, and we
camera
have
gear
to.
as well. Batteries. So you've always got that. So I mean, some people do a real audit to find exactly. It's difficult to do because
And we've got an electric battery now for the tender as well.
Yeah, so that's another thing we have to charge. But we've got we're going to get enough power to be able to do that. A lot of things you can do via the inverter, so you don't have to, if you've got something that's mains powered, you can just put the inverter on, not have to have a generator going to use. But as many things as possible, try and take straight off the 12-volt system, because the inverter actually is very wasteful in energy. So, I mean, things like this here is a USB plug socket that charges the iPad that we use for navigation, and that's great because that is just wired straight into the 12-volt system. I've got things like that, and these lights here. These lights come with a mains transformer because they're made to go on 240 volts, but I just chop that off and put them straight into the 12-volt system.
And our phone's charging, so our phones are always charging.
Yeah, we've got USB sockets all over the place, so that's just coming straight out the 12-volt system. And you never want to be actually plugging a 3-pin plug-in with your iPhone charger, because you've got to have the inverter on for that. So it's thinking of ways of saving stuff. Filling the space in your freezer. Empty air doesn't cool well, and if you fill it with, we fill the fridge with beer. If you and things like bread and ice cubes, fill that up. The bottom of our freezer's full of ice cubes at the moment. Because that just fills up the airspace. So look at ways of doing it. Obviously LED lights everywhere. It's about 1/10 of the power of an LED bulb that you'd have on a filament bulb. So that's a massive saving.
To do what you want to do as a cruiser, you need to look after your power needs. On Fair Isle, we've got 3 180 amp hour AGM batteries. That gives us a house bank of 540 amp hours. But you can't use all the power in a lead acid type battery. You can only use down to about 50%, so that equates to 270 amp hours. So that means you could use 270 amps in 1 hour, or 1 amp over 270 hours. But obviously what you actually use is somewhere in between that. The major electrical uses for us are the fridge freezer, which draws about 5 amps between them. It takes a bit more than that when they're going, but the compressor comes on and off. So that's going 24/7, so that's 120 amp hours over a 24-hour period. The auto helm's difficult to predict as well, because it really depends on what's happening with waves and weather. If you've got a big following sea, then you're using a lot of amps, but we average about 3 amps. If we're using that for about 10 hours, then that's about 30 amps on a sailing day. Computers are a big draw for us. We're quite often charging 2. They take about 4 amps each, so that's 8 amps. And if we say we have them on for about 3 hours a day, that's about 24 amp hours in any one day. Lights, well, we've got LED lights throughout now, so that makes a massive difference. So lights aren't a huge issue for us, probably about 15 amp hours in a day. Other items, well, it's difficult to predict, and this is only supposed to be rough. But remember, you've got all your nav gear if you're sailing. You might be charging iPads and phones and all sorts of other bits and pieces. So let's say we've got another 2 amp draw, so that's another 48 amp hours. So that's a total then of 237 amp hours. So that's okay, that's below our target figure. but we need to put that power back. If you're just day sailing, that's no problem at all. You get into dock, you plug into the mains, and your charger does the job for you. Ours delivers about 90 amps, and obviously you can just sit there all night or as long as you like until it gets the batteries all the way back up to 100%. But as a cruiser, you might not get into mains for weeks or months, so you need something else to take the place of that. On Fair Isle we have a generator. This produces mains which goes through the same mains transformer and delivers about 90 amps. It's actually capable of producing more than that, so at the same time as we're charging the batteries we can charge everything else. Just go around and plug everything in. When the battery reaches about 80% charge though, everything slows down. All lead acid batteries have this trait, whether they're AGMs, gels or wet cell batteries. Their internal resistance just means they accept less and less current as the charge goes up. So getting to about 80% is all you're going to want to do with something like a generator, because you'll be running it all night to get to 100%. So you need something else to take over at this point. In my opinion, the best thing for that is solar. And if you've got enough of it, you might even get up to 100% on a sunny day at anchor.
These are our two main solar panels. They're a bit dirty at the moment, but I've just come from down below and they're anyway giving us 25 amps, which is pretty good. There's a video on the website that Steve did about him fitting them and the technical details about that. But if you look here, we've also put up another frame where when we get into port, we're going to buy and fit another, possibly even bigger solar panel. So we should get another 15 amps from that. And it's just really nice to know that with solar, you are using nature, the sun, and you're generating your own power.
The other thing you need in your arsenal is a good alternator. The ones that come with boat engines are chronically bad, and their associated internal regulators. We have done a separate film on alternators. I'll put a link to that up in the corner. Ideally, you want your alternator to get you back up to 80% as you're using the engine to come into anchor. If you can do that, then you might be able to do without a generator. Your alternator should also be able to get you up to 100% on days when you're just motoring with no wind. This is really important because lead acid batteries like a regular charge to 100%, and many smaller alternators just won't do this. Don't be tempted to use the alternator as a generator at anchor though and run the engine for long periods. This is bound to coke up the top end and probably glaze the cylinders as well.
I'm now standing on what's probably the most expensive part of our boat, which is the bowsprit. And it's expensive because it takes us from being 48 foot to 57 foot. And had I realised that, or realised the implications of that when we first bought Fair Isle, I think I might have changed my mind, to be honest, because in some marinas that's doubled our marina fees.
Yeah, there's a sort of jump between 15 and 17 metres, and this takes us over. But yeah, I mean, that's one of the things with a boat like this, a heavy displacement boat. We need the sail area, so that's why the bowsprit's here. It's not just for show and for watching dolphins, although that's lovely. It's to get enough sail area to drive this boat properly, and it is a lovely thing to have. It's in the Med when you're going into expensive marinas. It might be an issue. I'm hoping elsewhere, the Caribbean, South Pacific, doesn't matter how big your boat is.
And when you're anchoring, of course, like we are now, it doesn't matter at all.
No. So like everything else, this is a compromise. No boat's perfect. So go out there, pick a boat that you think's right for you.
And everyone does think that their boat is best.
Oh yes, no, we certainly do that. Enjoy your boat.